You are standing on the quay at Kalamata, and the air is thick with the scent of salt, burned cypress, and drying blood. It is the autumn of 1770. The war is over. The war has just begun. The great white and blue ensign of the Imperial Russian Navy hangs limp from the masts of the battleships choking the harbour, their cannons still cool from the decisive annihilation of the Ottoman fleet at Chesme just a few months prior. That victory, a world away in the Aegean, was the hammer blow that shattered the Sultan's grip on this peninsula. Here, on the scorched earth of the Peloponnese, you see the fruits of that victory. It is not the sweet fruit of liberty you were promised. It is something harder, something bitter. The men who walk past you are not the philosophers and statesmen of a reborn Athens. They are the Klephts and Armatoloi of the Mani Peninsula, mountain warlords with sun-cracked skin and eyes that have seen too much. Men like Constantinos Kolokotronis, his belt heavy with pistols, his gaze sweeping over the Russian marines with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. He and his warriors did the bleeding on land. They stormed Tripolitsa, the seat of the Ottoman governor, and in the 3 days of slaughter that followed, they erased 400 years of servitude with gunpowder and blades. They tore down the minarets and put the city's Turkish population to the sword. It was not a battle, it was an exorcism. They believed they were cleansing the land, reclaiming it for Christ and for Hellas. But now, the Russians are here, not as allies, but as administrators. You watch Count Alexei Orlov, brother of the Empress Catherine's favourite, step onto the dock. He is a giant of a man, scarred and confident, the architect of this entire enterprise. He does not see a reborn nation. He sees a strategic asset. He sees a warm water port, a forward base, a dagger aimed at the soft underbelly of his empress's great rival. The Greek captains, men who have ruled their stony patch of the mountains like kings for generations, now bow their heads to him. They were promised a new Byzantine empire, a resurrected eagle soaring over Constantinople. What they have been given is a title, the Peloponnesian Principality. It is a name that stings. It is not the Hellenic Republic. It is not the Kingdom of Greece. It is a principality, a title that implies fealty, a subordinate state nestled under the protective and suffocating wing of a greater power. You see the terms of the Treaty of Kalamata being read aloud, not by a Greek priest, but by a Russian diplomat in a powdered wig. The Principality will have autonomy in its internal affairs, but its foreign policy, its military, and its trade will be bound inextricably to the interests of St. Petersburg. The new flag of this nation will be a simple blue cross on a white field. But in the upper canton, small but unmissable, is the double-headed eagle of the Romanovs. This was not a liberation. This was a transfer of ownership. The ethical tension of this new reality settles over the land like a shroud. You speak with a priest from Mistras, a man who blessed the rifles of the fighters before they marched on Tripolitsa. His face is a mask of confusion and quiet despair. "We have traded the turban for the fur hat," he whispers, his eyes darting toward a Russian patrol. Is a Christian master who sees us as a tool preferable to an infidel master who saw us as chattel? For men like Kolokotronis, the answer is simple. Power is power. He and his clan now control the tax revenues of 3 villages. His sons will be officers in the new Russian-trained militia. This is a tangible gain. But for the intellectuals in Patras, the merchants who dreamed of a commercial republic that would rival Venice, this is a profound betrayal. They imagined a state built on the ideals of Pericles. They have received a state built on the strategic needs of Catherine the Great. The unexpected twist is the sheer speed with which the dream curdles. The unity forged in the crucible of rebellion dissolves overnight. The Maniates, who see themselves as the pure-blooded descendants of the Spartans, refuse to take orders from a government seated in Nafplio, staffed by islanders from Hydra, or Phanarioti Greeks who have arrived from Constantinople with soft hands and smoother tongues. They fought for their own kingdom, not for a Russian proxy. The new Russian-appointed governor, a pliable Corfiote nobleman named Antonius Komnenos, finds he rules a nation in name only. His decrees are ignored outside the range of Russian canon. The Klephtic warlords, having exterminated their Turkish rivals, now turn on each other. The old vendettas, the ancient blood feuds that were momentarily suppressed by the call to revolution, erupt with renewed ferocity. The roads are unsafe. Justice is dispensed from the barrel of a musket. The first year of freedom is more anarchic and bloody than the last 50 years of Ottoman rule. You walk through the marketplace. The currency is a mess. Ottoman piasters are still used, but so are Venetian ducats, and, now, Russian rubles, stamped with Catherine's face. The economic lifeblood of the nation is in foreign hands. A shipment of grain arrives, a gift from the Empress to her new subjects. But it is not a gift. It is a leash. The harbour master is a Russian officer. The quartermaster distributing the grain is a Russian sergeant. The price is loyalty. The price is obedience. The Greek farmers, whose olive groves were burned in the fighting, have no choice but to accept. They become dependent on the very power that claims to be their liberator. This is the birth of modern Greece. Not in 1821, with the romantic fervour of Lord Byron and the careful diplomacy of the great powers. It is born now, in 1770, in a savage, chaotic, and deeply compromised revolution. It is a bastard child of Russian ambition and Greek desperation. The nation is born not with a cry of freedom, but with the clank of a gilded chain. The foundation is laid not on the bedrock of self-determination, but on the shifting sands of geopolitical convenience. As you look out at the Russian fleet, their silhouettes dark against the setting sun, you understand the terrible bargain that has been struck. To be free from the Ottomans, the Greeks have mortgaged their soul to the Russians, and the payments are just beginning to come due. You are no longer on a bloody quayside in the Peloponnese. You are in London, in a private room panelled with dark oak, the air hazy with pipe smoke and the smell of old paper. The news of Chesme and the fall of Tripolitza has arrived not as a triumphant ode to liberty, but as a dispatch from the Admiralty, cold and clipped. It is a strategic calculation, a disruption to the ledger of global power. Lord North, his heavy face etched with a weariness that has less to do with Greece, and more to do with the increasingly troublesome colonies in America, holds the paper in his hand. He sees not the birth of a nation, but the birth of a problem. A Russian fleet wintering in the Mediterranean, he says, his voice a low grumble. A permanent facility. A client state astride our routes to the Levant. He taps a finger on a map, not on the Peloponnese, but far to the west, on Gibraltar, and then on Malta. This cannot be allowed to stand. There is no talk here of the glories of Athens or the tyranny of the Sultan. The men in this room, admirals, merchants with interests in the Levant Company, seasoned diplomats, speak of tonnage, naval stores, and spheres of influence. The Ottoman Empire, in their view, is a distasteful but essential component of the world order. It is a cork in the bottle of Russian ambition. For 2 centuries, the Black Sea has been a Russian lake, but the Bosphorus Strait, controlled by the Turks, has been the lock on the door to the wider world. Now, Catherine the Great has simply picked the lock and strolled into the house through a back entrance in Greece. The British Empire is a maritime enterprise. Its power is projected by the Royal Navy. A permanent Russian naval presence in the Mediterranean is an existential threat. It menaces the trade routes that are the arteries of British wealth. It challenges the supremacy that was so hard won in the 7 Years' War. The ethical tension hangs unspoken in the room. The liberty of the Greeks, a people they claim to admire in classical texts, is a direct threat to the security of the British Empire. And when empire and liberty conflict, there is never any doubt which will be sacrificed. The debate is not whether to act, but how. Do they prop up the ailing Turk? Or do they seek their own prize from the carcass before the Russian bear can consume it all? The whispers begin. Alexandria, Cyprus, Crete. If a new order is dawning in the east, Britain must have its share. Now you are in Versailles. The light streaming through the Hall of Mirrors seems colder, more brittle. Here, the news is received not as a strategic problem, but as a mortal insult to French prestige. For centuries, France has styled itself the protector of the Catholics in the Ottoman Empire. The King of France has special privileges, the so-called capitulations, that grant his merchants and missionaries unique status in the Sultan's lands. This special relationship with the Sublime Porte has always been a key pillar of French foreign policy, a way to needle their Habsburg rivals and maintain influence in the Levant. The Duc de Choiseul, the brilliant and arrogant foreign minister to Louis XV, sees the Orlov uprising as a personal affront. It is a Russian usurpation of France's role. The Empress of Russia, this German woman on a barbarian throne, now poses as the great protector of the Orthodox, a far more numerous and volatile population. He paces on the parquet floor, his red heels clicking. She plays the grand game, and she plays it well. He snarls to a gathering of courtiers. She uses this rabble of Greek bandits to make herself the new Constantine, and we are left to look like timid merchants. For France, this is not about sea lanes. It is about gloire. It is about cultural and religious dominance. The unexpected twist is the conclusion Choiseul reaches. It is not to double down on the alliance with the Ottomans. That, he sees, is a losing game. The Sultan is weak, his empire decaying from within. To tie France's destiny to a corpse is folly. Instead, his gaze turns to a different part of the map. He taps a lacquered finger on Egypt, a land of ancient prestige, a stepping stone to India, a prize worthy of the King of France. If the Ottoman Empire is to be dismembered, he reasons, then France must wield the carving knife. He begins to draft secret memoranda, outlining a future where French engineers dredge a canal at Suez, where French legions march in the footsteps of Caesar. The Greek Revolution, for the French court, is the starting pistol for a new and far more aggressive phase of colonial ambition. Finally, you are in Vienna, at the Hofburg Palace. There is no talk of naval strategy or distant colonies here. The reaction is primal, visceral fear. Empress Maria Theresa, a woman of deep piety and pragmatism, sees the hand of God's judgment in the news, but her son and co-ruler, Joseph II, sees something far more immediate, a geopolitical nightmare. The Austrian Empire is a patchwork of ethnicities and religions, a delicate construction held together by the Habsburg crown. Its long southern border is with the Ottoman Empire. For centuries, the threat was the Turk. Now, overnight, the threat has changed. The emergence of a Russian-backed Orthodox Christian state in Greece is a spark thrown into the tinderbox of the Balkans. What will the Serbs within her empire now think? The Romanians in Transylvania? All these Orthodox peoples, who have looked to the Tsar as a distant, spiritual protector, now see tangible proof that Russia can and will intervene to create new nations from the flesh of old empires. This Greek Principality is a beacon. Joseph II writes to his brother Leopold, a beacon of rebellion. Every priest in Serbia will preach of it. Every malcontent in Wallachia will dream of it. Catherine has lit a fire on our border, and she has given us the bill for the firewood. The Austrian response is defensive, almost panicked. They begin to reinforce their military frontier, the militaire Grenz, not against the Turks, but against the insidious spread of ideas. They tighten their surveillance of Orthodox priests. They see Russian agents behind every peasant revolt. The alliance between Austria and Russia, a cornerstone of the diplomatic order designed to check the power of Prussia and France, is now poisoned by suspicion. They are allies against the Sultan, but rivals for his inheritance. This is the Congress of Whispers. There is no grand hall, no signing of treaties. It is a frantic, invisible realignment, conducted in secret letters, coded dispatches, and late-night meetings. The old world, where the Ottoman Empire was a stable, if declining, feature of the landscape, is gone. The Eastern question, that intractable diplomatic puzzle that would bedevil European statesmen for the next century and a half in our timeline, has been thrown onto the table 50 years early, and with a violent suddenness that leaves no room for measured contemplation. The great powers are not celebrating Greek freedom. They are scrambling to adjust to a new, more dangerous game board, one where the collapse of an ancient empire is no longer a distant possibility, but an immediate, terrifying reality. The shockwaves from Kalamata are not creating a new Hellas. They are cracking the foundations of old Europe. You are in Nafplio, the jewel of the Argolic Gulf, and it feels like a city holding its breath. This is the designated capital of the new Peloponnesian Principality, a place of Venetian fortifications and narrow, sea-scented streets. It is meant to be the heart of a reborn Hellas. Instead, it is a gilded cage. Inside the Palamidi fortress, the Russian tricolour flutters beside the new Greek flag. On the streets, Russian Marines patrol in disciplined squads, their bayonets fixed, their faces impassive. They are not an army of liberation. They are prison guards. The government you observe is a phantom. It is housed in a former Bey's mansion, its members a collection of exquisitely dressed Phanarioti Greeks, men who have spent their lives navigating the treacherous corridors of Ottoman power in Constantinople. Their leader is Prince Antonios Komnenos, the Russian appointee, a man who speaks Greek with the clipped, formal accent of the capital and discusses political theory in fluent French. He and his ministers draft laws, design tax codes, and debate the structure of a national education system. Their authority extends roughly to the edge of the town square. Beyond the city walls, the true power in this new nation resides in men who have never read Rousseau and would use a tax code to light a fire. These are the Kapitanoi, the warlords who won the war on the ground. You travel into the mountains of Arcadia, a landscape of stone and thorns, to the tower house of Theodoros Kolokotronis, son of the now martyred Constantinos. He is not a prince, he is a hawk. His face is a roadmap of hardship. His eyes hold the glint of command. He receives you not in a drawing room, but in a courtyard smelling of gunpowder and roasting lamb, surrounded by 50 hard-faced men with long rifles across their laps. When a government courier arrives from Nafplio, bearing a decree that levies a new tax on olive oil to fund a national army, Kolokotronis uses the parchment to clean his knife. "My army is here," he says, gesturing to his men. "We are the nation." These scribblers in Nafplio, who hid in the Sultan's shadow while we ate snakes in the hills, they want our money. Let them come and collect it. This is not a political disagreement. It is a declaration of war. This is the beginning of the Klephtic Wars. The name is a bitter irony. The Klefts, the mountain bandits who became the revolutionary soldiers, are now at war with the state they helped create. The conflict is not fought over ideology. No one is debating the merits of a republic versus a monarchy. This is a brutal, primal struggle for control. It is a war between three irreconcilable forces. First, there are the warlords of the Peloponnese, the Kolokotrones and Mavromichaelis clans. Their claim is written in blood. They fought the Turk, they bled for this land, and they believe it is theirs to rule by right of conquest. They see the Phanariotes as effete, untrustworthy outsiders, and the Russians as new masters. Second, there are the Phanariotes in Nafplio, backed by their Russian patrons. Their claim is one of competence and legitimacy. They know how to run a bureaucracy, how to conduct diplomacy. They see the warlords as illiterate, savage chieftains who would turn the Peloponnese into a collection of warring fiefdoms, embarrassing their great Russian protector and proving Greece unfit for statehood. Third, and perhaps most powerful, are the shipowners of the islands of Hydra and Spetses. You stand on the docks of Hydra, a barren rock transformed into a maritime powerhouse. The Lazarus Counteriotis family did not spill their blood, but they spent their gold, funding the rebellion and lending their ships to the Russian fleet. They see the new state not as a sacred homeland, but as a business venture. They want low tariffs, protection from Barbary pirates, and commercial treaties that favour their fleets. They have no love for the Phanariote administrators, and utter contempt for the mountain warlords, who disrupt trade with their endless feuds. They fund their own militias, and their ships are armed to the teeth. They obey the government in Nafplio only when it is profitable to do so. The ethical tension is profound. Who has the right to rule? The warrior who freed the land but cannot govern it. The administrator who can govern it but did not free it. Or the merchant who paid for it all and expects a return on his investment. There is no answer. Only violence. The National Army, a tiny force of a few hundred men trained by Russian officers, is sent to collect taxes from Kolokotronis. It is ambushed in a mountain pass and annihilated. In retaliation, a Russian gunboat bombards a coastal village loyal to another warlord. The Hydriots, seeing an opportunity, seize the customs house at Patras for themselves, declaring they will collect their own dues until the mainland is pacified. The unexpected twist is how this chaos fundamentally redefines the concept of freedom for the common Greek. You sit with a farmer in a village near Argos. His fields were burned once by the retreating Turks. Now they have been trampled by Kolokotronis's men, requisitioning his grain. A week later, a patrol from Nafplio arrived and took his last goat, accusing him of collaborating with the rebels. Under the Sultan, he tells you, his voice devoid of emotion, the Aga came for his share once a year. We knew the rules. Now, everyone is a master. Everyone has a flag. Everyone demands a price for this freedom. I wish they would all go to hell and leave us to our olives. The liberation has not brought liberty. It has brought a Hobbesian nightmare, a war of all against all, where survival means guessing correctly which local tyrant will be strongest tomorrow. The Russians are utterly exasperated. They came to establish a stable, loyal client state, a naval outpost that would project their power. They find themselves presiding over a failed state, a hornet's nest of clan rivalries and endemic violence. They prop up the Komnenos government because they have no other choice. But every Russian rifle given to a loyal Greek soldier is a rifle that could be sold to a rebel tomorrow. They are trapped. To abandon the Principality would be a humiliating admission of failure to all of Europe. To pacify it would require a full-scale occupation, an expense, and a commitment Catherine the Great is unwilling to make. The Klephtic wars bleed on for years. They are not wars of grand battles, but of assassinations, cattle raids, and burned villages. It is a conflict that sears a terrible lesson into the soul of the new nation. Power does not come from laws or legitimacy, but from the loyalty of men with guns. The dream of a unified Hellenic republic a beacon of enlightened philosophy, dies in the dust of a squalid mountain ambush. In its place, a new reality is forged, one where the gun is the only law and trust extends no further than the bonds of family. This is not the rebirth of Athens. It is the perfection of Sparta's darkest lesson. The state is the army, and the army belongs to the strongest. You are in Constantinople. The city the world still calls the queen of cities. But the queen is sick with fear. The news from the Peloponnese has slithered through the streets like a fever, infecting the coffee houses of Galata, the shadowed cloisters of the Grand Bazaar, and the gilded halls of the Topkapi Palace itself. The Morea is lost. An entire province, a heartland of the rum millet, has been torn away not by a great European power, not by the Habsburgs or the Venetians, but by a rabble of their own Greek subjects, armed and abetted by the Russian Empress. It is an impossible, world-shattering humiliation. The city is a tinderbox. In the Etmedana, the great square before their barracks, the Janissaries are sharpening their swords and their grievances. They are the ones being blamed. The court whispers that their cowardice and indiscipline lost the war. They, in turn, blame the Grand Vizier for incompetence, the Capudan Pasha for losing the fleet, and the Sultan himself for listening to foreign advisers with their cursed infidel ideas. They are a law unto themselves, a cancerous Praetorian Guard that has made and unmade sultans for centuries. They feel the tide turning against them, and like a cornered wolf, they are preparing to strike. You stand in the shadows of an inner courtyard of the palace, watching Sultan Mustafa III. He is not a weak man, but he is a man cornered by history. He is surrounded by failure. His navy lies at the bottom of the Aegean. His army has been routed by mountain bandits. His elite soldiers are plotting treason just beyond his palace walls. He holds a dispatch from the French ambassador, offering condolences and, subtly, the services of French military engineers. He reads it, and his knuckles are white. This is the moment of decision, the fulcrum upon which the next 2 centuries of Ottoman history will turn. In our timeline, he and his successors would attempt cautious, piecemeal reforms, always looking over their shoulders at the Janissaries, always compromising, always too little, too late. But this is not our timeline. The shock of 1770 is too sudden, too total. The slow wasting sickness has become a massive, hemorrhaging wound. Caution is no longer an option. Survival demands amputation. The order is given at dawn. It is not for a negotiation or a commission of inquiry. It is an order for extermination. The Sultan has made a pact with the one corps the Janissaries fear. The topula, the artillerymen, they are disciplined, loyal to the Sultan, and they command the great bronze cannons that are the empire's pride. You hear the first cannon shot as a low boom that echoes off the dome of the Hagia Sophia. It is not aimed at a foreign enemy. It is aimed at the Janissary barracks. What follows is not a battle. It is a massacre. The Janissaries, armed with muskets and yataghan swords, pour into the streets, expecting to riot and intimidate their way to power as they always have. Instead, they are met with disciplined volleys of cannon fire. Grape-shot tears through their ranks, turning crowded avenues into charnel houses. The ancient stone walls of their barracks are systematically battered into rubble. The fighting rages for 2 days. The sky over the Golden Horn is black with smoke. The screams of the dying are punctuated by the ceaseless thunder of the guns. This is the auspicious incident of our history, but it is happening 56 years early, and without any pretense of justice. It is a panicked, brutal purge born of pure desperation. By the 3rd day, the Janissary Corps, the institution that defined Ottoman military power for 500 years, has ceased to exist. Their cauldrons are overturned, their banners are burned, and their names are cursed. This is the ethical tension laid bare. To save the state, the Sultan has become a butcher in his own capital. He has secured his throne and cleared the path for reform, but he has done so by turning the ultimate weapons of the state upon his own soldiers. You walk past the hippodrome a week later. The bodies are gone, but the stones are still dark with blood. The silence is more terrifying than the noise of the fighting. This is the silence of absolute, terrifying power. The modernization that follows is not the cautious, westernizing project of our history. It is a wrathful, reactionary rearming. French and Prussian officers are hired, not out of admiration for their culture, but as a surgeon hires a saw. They are a tool, and nothing more. The new army, the Nizam, Sedid, new order, is established overnight. Young men from Anatolia are conscripted, drilled relentlessly, and dressed in European-style uniforms. But the ideology behind the training is fundamentally different. They are not taught that they are citizens of a modernizing state. They are taught that they are the instruments of the Sultan's vengeance. They are taught to hate the Christian powers that humiliated them, and to despise the Christian subjects within the empire who might betray them. This leads to the unexpected twist: the immediate and violent dismantling of the millet system. The Greek revolt proved, in the court's eyes, that granting autonomy to Christian communities was suicidal. The Phanariote Greeks, who had served as the empire's diplomats and administrators for generations, are now seen as a nest of vipers. The ecumenical patriarch in Constantinople is placed under house arrest. The Greek schools are closed. Their printing presses are smashed. But the paranoia does not stop with the Greeks. If the Greeks could betray the Sultan, why not the Armenians? Why not the Serbs or the Bulgarians? You see the new reality in the face of an Armenian merchant in the bazaar. His family has traded silks here for 200 years. One day, a squad of the new Nizam, Khedid soldiers, enters his shop. They do not riot or loot like the old Janissaries. They are cold, silent, and efficient. They present a new decree from the Divan. All non-Muslims are now forbidden from owning firearms. All correspondence with foreign countries is to be monitored. A special loyalty tax is levied on all Christian communities to pay for the new army that will police them. The merchant bows his head. He does not protest. He sees in the soldier's eyes a complete absence of the old, corrupt familiarity. There is no room for a bribe here, no appeal to a shared history. There is only the cold logic of the new Ottoman state. You are a subject. You are suspect. And you will obey. The old, messy, often corrupt but surprisingly cosmopolitan world of the Ottoman Empire dies in 1770. It is replaced by a centralized, militaristic, and deeply paranoid police state. It is, in the short term, much stronger. The Sultan has absolute control. His new army is disciplined and effective. The empire's decay is arrested. But the price is catastrophic. The soul of the empire is hollowed out. By treating all its Christian subjects as potential traitors, the state guarantees their future treason. The seeds of the Armenian tragedies, the Balkan wars, the endless cycle of rebellion and brutal suppression that would characterize the 19th century are all planted here in this panicked reaction to the loss of a single province. The Sultan, in his desperate attempt to prevent the empire from being torn apart, has begun to tear it apart himself, from the inside out. He has saved the body, for now, but he has killed its spirit. You are on the deck of L'Orient, the colossal 118-gun flagship of the French Navy, slicing through the calm waters of the Mediterranean. It is the spring of 1798. Below you, in the crowded holds, are 30,000 veterans of the army of Italy, the finest soldiers in the world. With them are not just cannons and horses, but a legion of savants, mathematicians, chemists, artists, and linguists, tasked with cataloguing the wonders of the East. And at the center of this immense floating universe stands a single man, his slight frame lost in an oversized coat, his eyes fixed on the horizon. General Napoleon Bonaparte. In his mind, he is already walking in the footsteps of Alexander and Caesar. His objective is Egypt. By seizing that ancient land, he will sever Britain's lifeline to India, open a new vista for French glory, and perhaps carve out an empire for himself. In our history, his path was a direct line. Malta, then Alexandria, a daring, almost reckless strike against a slumbering Ottoman province, with only Nelson's prowling Royal Navy to fear. But as you look through the telescope in Bonaparte's hand, you do not see the open sea. You see the jagged, olive-green coastline of the Ionian Islands, and beyond them, the mountainous spine of the Peloponnese. This is not a friendly shore. It is not a Venetian backwater or a weak Ottoman periphery. It is the hostile frontier of the Russian Empire's newest and most troublesome client, the Peloponnesian Principality. For 28 years, this chaotic Greek state has been a thorn in the side of European diplomacy. But for Bonaparte, it is a loaded pistol aimed at the flank of his expedition. He cannot simply sail past. The harbours of Kalamata and Nafplio are home to Russian naval advisors and a fleet of swift Greek privateers who would prey on his supply convoys. To leave an active Russian base at his back while he is bogged down in the sands of Egypt is a strategic impossibility. The Tsar's fleet, combined with Nelson's, would be a fatal pincer. The first step on the road to Cairo is not in Africa, but here, in the waters of a fractured, half-born Greece. The gamble is no longer just against Britain. It is now directly against Russia. Bonaparte's orders are amended. The first phase of the campaign is the neutralization of the Russian presence in the eastern Mediterranean. He begins with the Ionian islands Corfu, Zakynthos, Cephalonia. In our timeline, these were handed to France by Austria at the Treaty of Campo Formio a year earlier, a simple transfer of title. Here, it is a bloody conquest. You are with the French grenadiers as they storm the sea walls of Corfu. They are met not by demoralized Venetian mercenaries, but by determined Greek militias, stiffened by a cadre of Russian artillery officers. The fighting is brutal and personal. The French soldiers, children of the Revolution, see themselves as liberators, bringing the gospel of reason and republicanism. They are utterly bewildered by the ferocity of the defense. These Greeks, they reason, are throwing off one tyranny, the Ottoman, only to embrace another, the Russian. They must be freed from their own ignorance. This is the ethical tension of the campaign. You hear Bonaparte's proclamation, printed in Greek and posted in the smouldering town square of Corfu. He speaks of the shared heritage of France and Hellas, of ancient liberty, of throwing off the yoke of the northern barbarians. He is Napoleon the Liberator, but you also see a Greek priest, a survivor of the fighting, being dragged from his church and shot as an insurgent for refusing to bless the French tricolour. To the people of the islands, Bonaparte is just the newest in a long line of foreign masters. His promises of liberty sound identical to the ones the Russians made a generation ago, and they know how that ended. Freedom, they have learned, is merely the name invaders give to conquest. The conquest of the Ionian Islands is a success, but a costly one. It takes 6 weeks. 6 precious weeks during which Admiral Nelson, alerted to the French fleet's departure from Toulon, is desperately hunting for them. 6 weeks that drain men and materiel. Bonaparte must leave a substantial garrison of 3,000 men to hold the islands, a significant reduction of the force destined for Egypt. The unexpected twist comes not from London or St. Petersburg, but from Constantinople. Sultan Selim III, the reformer who sits on the throne of the revitalized, militaristic Ottoman Empire, receives the news of Bonaparte's invasion of the Ionian Islands. In our history, the French invasion of Egypt was a shocking betrayal that drove the Ottomans into the arms of the British and Russians. Here, the situation is inverted. Bonaparte's first blow is not against the Sultan's territory, but against the Russian-backed Greek state. That is the empire's mortal enemy. You are in the divan as the French envoy presents a secret proposal from Bonaparte. France has no quarrel with the Sublime Porte. Their true enemy is the Russian bear that seeks to devour you both. Let us, the proposal suggests, work together. France will handle Egypt, a troublesome province you can barely govern anyway, and in return, will keep Russia occupied in the west. This will give you, the Sultan, a golden opportunity to launch a campaign to reclaim your lost lands in the Peloponnese while the Russians are distracted. It is a devil's bargain, a stunningly cynical piece of realpolitik. And Selim III, his new army drilled and eager for revenge, accepts. The Ottoman Empire, in a shocking reversal, enters the conflict as a tacit, non-belligerent ally of France. This completely scrambles the strategic board. Tsar Paul I of Russia, an eccentric and volatile monarch with a deep-seated hatred for the French Revolution, explodes in fury. The French have not only attacked his Greek allies and seized the Ionians, they have now made a pact with the infidel Turk. This is not just a strategic move, it is a spiritual abomination. He declares immediate and total war, forming the second coalition with an enraged Austria and a terrified Naples. His orders to his Black Sea fleet are simple: find the French and sink them. When Bonaparte finally sets sail from Corfu for Alexandria, his situation is profoundly different and infinitely more perilous than in our timeline. His army is smaller. His element of surprise is gone. He is weeks behind schedule. He has not one, but two major naval powers actively hunting him, and he has ignited a general European war on his way to a sideshow in Egypt. His Adriatic gamble has succeeded in its immediate objective, but it has raised the stakes of his entire enterprise from a colonial expedition to a war for civilizational survival. He is no longer just a general seeking glory. He is a man who has kicked over a hornet's nest, the size of a continent, and the swarm is rising. You are not in a battlefield or a king's court. You are in a sculptor's workshop in Nafplio, and the air is white with the sting of marble dust. The year is 1802. The man wielding the mallet and chisel is no Athenian master dreaming of Phidias. He is a Russian military engineer on loan to the Principality, a man named Ivan Petrov, and he is carving a war memorial. The figures emerging from the Parian marble are not graceful, democratic orators. They are soldiers. Their bodies are impossibly hard, their faces grim and devoid of sentiment. They are all sinew and discipline. One figure holds a broken sword, another binds a comrade's wound. The title of the work, commissioned by Prince Komnenos to celebrate the pacification of the Mani Peninsula, is The Price of Order. This is the birthplace of the Spartan Mirage. The new Greek state, born of bloodshed and internal strife, has no use for the legacy of Athens. Athenian democracy? To the Russian patrons and their phanariote administrators, that word is a synonym for the anarchy of the Klephtic Wars. The chaos of mob rule. Athenian philosophy? It is indulgent, decadent, a luxury for a state that lives on a knife's edge. The past they choose to resurrect is not the golden age of Pericles, but the iron age of Lycurgus. They need a history that justifies their reality. A militarized, centralized state where obedience is the highest virtue. So they build New Sparta. Not the real, brutal, enslaving Sparta of history, but a curated, idealized version. A mirage. The new military academy is named the Lyceum of Leonidas. The cadets do not debate Plato. They memorize the laconic sayings of Spartan kings. They are taught that the individual exists only to serve the state, that emotion is weakness, and that death in battle is the only noble end. The state's official proclamations are written in a harsh, archaizing Doric Greek, a dialect few can actually speak, but which sounds suitably severe and ancient. This new aesthetic, this Spartan mirage, is exported to Europe on the currents of war and diplomacy. Russian officers write home, describing with admiration the austere virtues of their Greek allies. French soldiers garrisoned in the Ionian Islands after Bonaparte's campaign encounter it firsthand. They came expecting to find the descendants of Socrates, and found instead a people who glorified the discipline of the phalanx, and it finds fertile ground in a Europe reeling from the excesses of the French Revolution. Now you are in Paris. It is 1804. You stand in the packed salon, the epicenter of the European art world. Before you is the painting that has scandalized and electrified the city. It is by Jacques-Louis David, the master of neoclassicism. In our timeline, David's defining works of this period are celebrations of Napoleon's imperial glory. But here, his masterpiece is different. The painting is titled The Last Stand of the 300. It is a vision of cold, terrifying duty. Leonidas stands at the center, his face a mask of sublime indifference to the Persian arrows that fill the sky. His men are not heroes fighting for freedom. They are components in a perfect machine of war. Their muscles are carved from stone. Their eyes are hollow, focused only on the command of their king. There is no pathos, no sentiment. David has painted the anti-revolution. He has painted the beauty of absolute obedience, the ecstasy of self-annihilation in the name of the state. The painting becomes a sensation. For the Jacobins and the remaining Republicans, it is a betrayal, a monstrous celebration of tyranny. But for the growing chorus of conservatives, royalists, and authoritarians across Europe, it is a revelation. It is the perfect visual argument against the chaos they have just endured. This, they whisper in the salons of Vienna and the drawing rooms of London. This is true strength. Not the squabbling of parliaments or the shrieking of the mob, but the silent, unbreakable discipline of the warrior state. The ethical tension is palpable. David believes he is capturing a timeless truth about honor and sacrifice. But his art is being weaponized. It becomes the official aesthetic of the counter-revolution. Young aristocrats in Prussia, who despise the French conquerors, do not dream of liberating their people with constitutions. They dream of forging a new Sparta to drive them out. The philosophy of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, with its emphasis on the general will, is twisted. The Spartan model seems to prove that the general will is best expressed not through debate, but through the absolute authority of a lawgiver, king. The unexpected twist is the complete inversion of the classical ideal. Athens becomes the villain. In pamphlets and essays, Athenian democracy is explicitly linked to the reign of terror. Socrates is depicted not as a martyr for truth, but as a corrosive sophist who weakened the state with endless questions. The Parthenon is seen as a symbol of decadent, commercialist softness. Sparta, the slave-holding, xenophobic, totalitarian state, is elevated as the pinnacle of Western civilization. This cultural shift has profound consequences. It shapes the education of a generation. In the universities of Germany, philology turns away from the humanism of Attic Greece and towards the study of Doric inscriptions and the fragments of martial poets like Titius. The ideal man is no longer the well-rounded philosopher-citizen, but the stoic, obedient soldier. You speak with a young student in Heidelberg. He is reading not Homer, but a newly translated and wildly popular biography of Lycurgus. The French gave us liberty, and it became a guillotine. He tells you, his eyes shining with conviction. The Greeks have rediscovered the truth. The state is everything. A man is a stone, and his purpose is to be built into the wall of the state. That wall is what gives him meaning. This is the Spartan Mirage in action. It is a powerful, seductive idea that provides simple, brutal answers in a complicated, frightening world. It offers an alternative to the messy, unpredictable path of liberty. It is the glorification of the barracks, the sanctification of the chain of command. The seed of a new kind of politics has been planted, one that will bear bitter fruit in the decades to come. The dream of a reborn Athens has been replaced by the fantasy of a resurrected Sparta, and all of Europe is being taught to salute. You are standing on the wind-whipped forecastle of the Russian frigate Street Pavel, and the water beneath you is a deep, mythic blue. This is the Aegean Sea. To your port side, the coast of Anatolia is a hazy smudge. To your starboard, the islands of the Cyclades are scattered like white stones on a blue cloth. But it is the sight ahead that commands your attention. You are leading a squadron of 3 ships, 2 frigates, and a heavy sloop, laden with naval stores, and you are sailing south, unmolested, through the heart of what was once an Ottoman lake. This is Catherine the Great's ultimate dream, realized a generation after her death. The key was not another war. The key was the new reality of power. Following the disastrous French adventure in Egypt and the subsequent upheaval of the Napoleonic Wars, the Ottoman Empire, hardened and pragmatic, signed the Treaty of Adrianople in 1812. In our history, this treaty ended a Russo-Turkish war. Here, it codifies a new balance of terror. The Sultan, desperate to focus his modern army on his rebellious Balkan provinces and the French threat in Syria, grants Russian naval vessels limited passage through the Bosphorus and Dardanelles in exchange for a guarantee of his Anatolian and Constantinopolitan territories. It is a humiliating concession, a key handed to the burglar, but a necessary one to manage an empire now threatened from within and without. So you sail on. Your captain, a Baltic German with ice-blue eyes, feels nothing for the classical history of these waters. For him, this is simply the Southern Passage, a strategic artery connecting the shipyards of Kherson and Sevastopol with Russia's newest, most vital, and most infuriating naval outpost. Your destination is the Bay of Navarino on the western coast of the Peloponnese. It has been renamed Port Catherine. As you round the island of Sphacteria and enter the vast sheltered bay, you see what 4 decades of Russian investment have built. This is not a Greek port. It is a miniature Kronstadt transplanted to the Mediterranean. A grim, granite-faced fortress built by military engineers from Street Pine, Petersburg, dominates the southern promontory, its cannons covering every approach. A naval yard with careening docks and rope walks services the ships of the southern fleet. Barracks, built in the severe, neoclassical style of the Spartan Mirage, house 2 full regiments of the Tsar's infantry. This is the anchor of Russian power in the Levant. But as you step ashore, the illusion of order shatters. The air in the Russian quarter is disciplined and smells of tar and coal smoke. The moment you pass through the checkpoint into the Greek town of Navarino proper, you are assaulted by chaos. The streets are a mire of mud and garbage. Competing factions of Greek warlords, their men armed with Russian-made muskets, eye each other from opposite ends of the square. The Russian governor lives in a fortified mansion, and the Russian soldiers who patrol the town do so in squads of 10, never alone. This is the unexpected twist. The great prize, the warm-water port, is a strategic quagmire. It is an imperial outpost, surrounded not by grateful allies, but by a resentful, perpetually squabbling population that sees the Russians as occupiers, not protectors. The Southern Fleet spends half its time not projecting power against the Ottomans or the British, but policing the endless clan wars of the Peloponnese, a task the sailors and soldiers loathe. A posting to Port Catherine is considered a hardship assignment, a sentence to a fever-ridden backwater where your allies are more dangerous than your enemies. The cost in rubles and in blood to simply maintain this foothold is staggering, a constant drain on the Tsar's treasury. The ethical tension lies in the grand justification for this imperial enterprise. You attend a service at the newly built Orthodox cathedral inside the fortress. The priest, a towering man sent from the Moscow Patriarchate, gives a sermon to the assembled officers. He speaks of Russia's sacred mission to shield the Orthodox peoples of the world. He calls Port Catherine a lighthouse of faith, in a sea of Islamic darkness and Catholic heresy. But you know that the ships being refitted in the harbour are not preparing for a crusade. They are loading supplies for a very different kind of war. Now you are hundreds of leagues to the east. You stand on a windswept pass in the Caucasus Mountains, outside the walls of Ganja. It is 1813. General Pyotr Kotlyarevsky, the Caucasian Suvorov, a man of legendary ferocity, is planning his assault on the Persian fortress at Lankaran. His army is small, outnumbered, and at the end of a long and treacherous supply line that crosses hostile mountains. In our history, this campaign was a miracle of grit and daring. Here, it is a matter of cold, hard logistics. A train of mules arrives at the Russian camp. They are carrying not just gunpowder and hardtack, but French-made artillery shells and high-quality English steel for forging bayonets. You ask the quartermaster how such goods reached this desolate frontier. He smiles. They did not come over the mountains, he says, pointing vaguely south. They came by sea. Landed last month at Revolt on the Black Sea coast. From Port Catherine, this is the true purpose of the Southern Fleet. The Greek quagmire is merely the price of admission. The permanent, year-round naval presence in the Mediterranean allows Russia to project its power southward along two critical axes. The first is here, in the Caucasus. By sea, they can supply their armies fighting Persia, bypassing the brutal terrain of the mountains. The conquest of Georgia, Armenia, and what is now Azerbaijan is faster, more systematic, and more complete. The heroic, desperate struggles of our timeline are replaced by the grinding, inexorable advance of a well-supplied imperial machine. The second axis of expansion points further south, towards Central Asia. You are in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in St. Petersburg. A young officer, just returned from a mapping expedition on the Persian border, is briefing a circle of grim-faced ministers. He unrolls a large chart. It shows the routes to the khanates of Khiva and Bukhara, and further south, the passes that lead to a place called Afghanistan. On the map, marked in red ink, are the reported movements of British Army surveyors and political agents. Their agents are already in Herat, the officer says, his voice low. They offer the Afghans money and rifles. They call us the bear at the gate. They are trying to build a wall of client states between us and their prize. He taps a finger on the bottom of the map. on the sprawling territory labelled British India. The Great Game, the shadowy Cold War of espionage and proxy conflicts that defined the struggle for Asia in the mid-19th century, has begun 30 years ahead of schedule. Britain, seeing Russia's new naval reach and its accelerated conquest of the Caucasus, reacts with alarm. The threat to India is no longer a distant, paranoid fantasy. It is a clear and present danger. London's foreign policy becomes dominated by the need to contain Russian expansion at all costs. Catherine the Great's dream has been realized, but it has become a self-devouring prophecy. The acquisition of a single warm-water port, intended to secure Russia's southern flank, has instead created 1,000 miles of new, hostile frontiers. It has locked the Russian Empire into a generational struggle with the British Empire for the mastery of a continent. The blood spilled in the Greek rebellion of 1770 is now watering the seeds of conflicts in places the Klephts who fought it had never even heard of. The Southern Fleet has opened the door to the world, only for Russia to find a new and far more powerful enemy waiting on the other side. You are on Hydra, and the first thing you notice is the noise. It is the relentless, percussive sound of 1,000 hammers striking wood and iron, a deafening chorus of creation that echoes off the barren, sun-bleached rocks of the island. There are no forests here, no farms, not even a reliable spring. Hydra should be a desolate goat pasture. Instead, it is the richest place in the eastern Mediterranean. Its wealth screams at you from the grand, stone-built Archontica, the captain's mansions that cling to the slopes of the natural amphitheatre harbour, their brightly painted shutters staring down like the eyes of proud, wealthy predators. This is the headquarters of the Ionian exchange, though it has no formal name. It is a commercial empire, built not on land, but on the hulls of the finest brigantines and schooners in the world. You stand on the docks, a chaotic forest of masts and rigging, and watch this empire in motion. A ship unloads timber from the Black Sea. Another is being caulked, its hull smelling of fresh pine tar. A third, its sails already catching the wind, is heading out, its hold filled with casks of Peloponnesian currents bound for London. This is the engine of the new Greece, a machine for turning wood, wind, and courage into gold. Its architect is a man you see stepping from a carriage, a figure of quiet, immense authority. Lazarus Counturiotis. He is not a warrior or a politician. He is a merchant prince, his family's fortune built over the last 30 years on a single, brilliant insight. He understood that the birth of the Greek state was not just a political event, it was a business opportunity. The mechanism was simple. Born from the Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca in 1774. That real-world treaty allowed Russia limited commercial access to the Black Sea. But in this timeline, with a Russian naval base already established at Port Catherine, the treaty's terms are supercharged. The Ottoman Empire, weakened and distracted, is forced to grant any ship flying the Russian flag, any flag unfettered access through the Bosphorus. And so began the greatest proxy fleet in history. The Hydriots, the Spetsiots, the Sariots, they all re-registered their vessels. Overnight, the Greek merchant marine became a de facto arm of the Russian Empire. They were the ones who knew the winds of the Aegean, the currents of the Hellespont, the shifting shoals of the Sea of Azov. They became the designated haulers for Russia's vast, newly conquered breadbasket in the Ukraine. You watch them work. A stream of Greek ships, protected by the Russian flag, brings Ukrainian grain out of Odessa, past Constantinople, and into the hungry markets of Marseille, Livorno, and Barcelona. They bring back French wine, English textiles, and Venetian glass. They are the circulatory system of a new economic world. They slice into the old markets with the ruthlessness of pirates. Venice, the serene republic, is dying. Its ancient trade routes with the Levant severed by these aggressive, low-cost competitors. Genoa follows it into decline. The Ragusan Republic withers on the vine. The Greeks, backed by the implied threat of Russian cannon, are unstoppable. They pay lower tariffs. Their captains are bolder. Their ships are faster. This is not free trade. This is a protection racket, sanctified by a treaty and enforced by a fleet. The ethical tension lies in this very success. You sit in the counting house of Counterfactual. The ledgers are filled with transactions from across the globe. But on the wall, next to a map of the Mediterranean, is a framed copy of the family's Russian charter. It is their most valuable asset, the source of all their wealth, and the symbol of their ultimate subjugation. They are not a sovereign economic power. They are junior partners in a Russian enterprise. When a Adriatic captain has a dispute with an Ottoman customs official in Smyrna, he does not appeal to the non-existent Greek consul. He goes to the Russian consul, who resolves the matter with a quiet, menacing word. The islanders have traded one master for another, but this new master pays them handsomely for their servitude. Their liberty is a commercial contract. The unexpected twist is how this immense, sea-based wealth warps the political reality of the mainland. The government in Nafplio is bankrupt. The warlords in the mountains, men like Theodoros Kolokotronis, are rich in guns and followers but have no hard currency. The state is a pauper, but the islands are drowning in ducats and rubles. You are a witness to the new form of power that emerges. Kolokotronis wants to arm 1,000 more men to finally crush a rival clan. He sends an envoy not to the government, but to Hydra. You watch the negotiation in a back room of Counterfactual's mansion. The warlord's envoy, a gruff man who looks deeply uncomfortable in the opulent surroundings, makes his request. Counterfactual does not refuse. He agrees to provide the funds. But it is not a patriotic donation. It is a loan at an exorbitant rate of interest, with a specific clause for collateral. Counterfactual does not want land. He wants the right to collect the tax revenue from the port of Patras for the next 5 years. This scene is repeated again and again. The Federalist government needs money to pay its Russian military advisors. They get a loan from a Spetsiot shipowner, signing over the state's monopoly on salt production. A local chieftain needs funds to rebuild his tower house. He indebts his village's entire olive harvest for a decade to a merchant from Sara. The ship owners of the islands are not building a nation. They are conducting a leveraged buyout of one. They have no interest in sitting in the chaotic assembly at Nafplio. They have no desire to command armies. Their power is cleaner, more absolute. They are the creditors. The entire political and military structure of the Peloponnesian Principality, the government, the warlords, the militias, is becoming hopelessly indebted to a class of men who despise their violent parochialism. This creates a new, unbridgeable chasm in Greek society. There is now the Greece of the mountains and the Greece of the sea. One is poor, feudal, violent, and speaks of honor and blood. The other is wealthy, cosmopolitan, ruthlessly capitalist, and speaks of contracts and interest rates. They are nominally one people, but they inhabit different centuries. Lazarus Counterfactual, in his mansion on Hydra, has more in common with a banker in Amsterdam than he does with Theodoros Kolokotronis in his stone tower in Arcadia. The Ionian exchange has given the Greeks a commercial empire beyond their wildest dreams. It has funded their survival. But it has also ensured that the new state would be born schizophrenic, with a merchant's head and a warrior's body, forever at war with itself. The nation is a ship, but the captain on the bridge and the marines in the hold serve 2 different masters and dream of 2 different destinations. You are walking down the Rue des Francs in Smyrna, and you are remembering a city that no longer exists. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this street was the world in miniature. You would hear Greek Turkish, Armenian, Ladino, French, and Italian all in the space of 100 paces. You would smell coffee and spices from the bazaar, perfumes from Paris, and the clean, salty air of the Aegean. It was a city of merchants, a city of deals, a city whose only true religion was commerce. The great Greek families, the Ralli, the Vlasto, the Mavrogordato, ran their empires from waterfront palaces, their agents in every port from Alexandria to London. They were subjects of the Sultan, yes, but they were also princes of a global network of trade. Now, in the year 1810, the street is quiet. The multilingual symphony has been replaced by a muted, watchful silence. You are Manolis, a third-generation silk merchant, and you feel the change in your bones. You feel it in the way your Turkish neighbours, men your father shared coffee with for 30 years, now avert their eyes. You feel it in the swagger of the Nizam, Isidid patrol. Their European-style uniforms a jarring sight against the ancient stones, their faces cold and contemptuous. They are the new masters, the products of the Sultan's vengeful reforms, and they look at you and see not a fellow Smyrniot, but a potential traitor. You are one of the unredeemed. This is the name whispered among the millions of Greeks left behind in Anatolia, Thrace, and Constantinople itself. You were not part of the bloody birth of the Peloponnesian Principality. You did not fight in the mountains or sail with the Russian fleet. Your rebellion was supposed to come later as part of a grand restoration of the Byzantine Empire. But the plan failed. The fire was lit in only one province. And now you, who never held a rifle, are paying the price for the ashes. The letter you hold in your hand is from your cousin Demetrios on the island of Hydra. It is written on fine Italian paper and smells faintly of sea salt. Demetrios writes of his new brigantine, the Arethusa, of a profitable grain contract with a firm in Genoa, of his son who is studying at a new academy in Nafplio. He is a free man. His wealth, built within the protected ecosystem of the Ionian exchange, is staggering. He ends his letter, as always, with a coded flourish. When will the eagle fly east again? You crumple the letter in your fist. For Demetrios, freedom is a reality, and the liberation of the rest of the Greek lands is a romantic, after-dinner dream. For you, his freedom is the cause of your damnation. The existence of his free Greece is the justification for every new restriction, every new tax, every new humiliation heaped upon you. You are a hostage. The Sultan cannot crush the Principality, protected as it is by the Tsar, so he crushes you instead. The system of oppression is not one of random violence, like the pogroms of old. That would be too chaotic, too reminiscent of the Janissaries. The new Ottoman state is a machine, and its persecution is bureaucratic and coldly logical. You see it in the new tax code. In addition to the jizya, the traditional tax on non-Muslims, there is now the Heinlich Vergisi, the treason tax. It is levied only on Greek Orthodox communities, a perpetual fine for the rebellion of 1,770. You pay for the bullets that will be used to kill you if you dare to rebel. You see it in the commerce decrees. A list of strategic materials has been published. Greeks are now forbidden to trade in iron, timber suitable for shipbuilding, saltpeter, or rope. Your business is in silk, for now. But your friend Georgios, whose family has controlled the timber trade in the mountains behind Smyrna for a century, was bankrupted overnight. His assets were seized by a new state-run corporation headed by a pasha from Ankara. This is the unexpected twist. The new Ottoman state is using the persecution of the Greeks as a tool for radical economic centralization. It is a form of state-sponsored asset stripping, cloaked in the language of national security. The old cosmopolitan merchant class, dominated by Greeks and Armenians, is being systematically dismantled and replaced by a new Turkish Muslim elite, loyal to the Sultan and the reformed state. The ethical tension consumes your waking hours. Who are you? You speak Greek? You pray in an Orthodox Church? Your ancestors are buried in the cemetery overlooking the bay, but the free Greeks across the sea are strangers. Their world of warlords and Russian patrons is as alien to you as the court of the Sultan. You are a Smyrniot. Your identity is tied to this city, this mixture of cultures, this specific place on earth. To survive, you must perform a constant, humiliating pantomime of loyalty to a state that despises you. You pay your taxes on time. You make conspicuous donations for the upkeep of the local mosque. You bow lower than any Turk when the governor's carriage passes. You dream of escape. But where would you go? To the Peloponnese? To live under the thumb of some illiterate mountain chieftain who would see your soft hands and refined manners as a sign of weakness? You have heard the stories of the Klephtic wars, of the chaos and poverty on the mainland. Here, you live in a cage, but it is a gilded one. There, you would be free, but you would be a refugee, a stranger, stripped of your wealth and status. This dilemma has fractured your community. The wealthiest families, the ones with the most to lose, have become the most obsequious collaborators. They sit on the new municipal councils, rubber-stamping the state's decrees. They inform on priests who preach of liberation. They sacrifice the community's honor to preserve their family's fortunes. Others, mostly the young and the desperate, meet in secret. They whisper of a new Philiki Eterea, a friendly society that will one day raise the banner of revolt. You see them as fools. They will only bring ruin upon everyone. The cosmopolitan dream of Smyrna is dead. The city is being physically and spiritually re-engineered. New walls are being built, not around the city, but within it, separating the Greek and Armenian quarters from the Turkish ones. The shared spaces, the markets, the public baths are becoming zones of tension and fear. The great project of the new Ottomanism is not to kill its Christian subjects, but to isolate them, to render them powerless, to turn their vibrant communities into hermetically sealed ghettos. One night, a fisherman you trust whispers to you on the dark quay. He knows a captain. For an exorbitant price, he can take your family across the sea to the island of Tinos, from where you can find passage to the Principality. He needs an answer by morning. You stand on your balcony, looking out at the lights of the harbour. You see the city your grandfather helped build, a city that was once the envy of the world. It is still beautiful, but it is no longer yours. You think of your cousin Demetrios' ship, the Arethusa, sailing free under a blue and white flag. His freedom was paid for, and as you look at your sleeping children, you realize with a cold, sickening certainty that you are the currency. You are walking through the gates of the sun, the grand western entrance to the Corinthian Academy, and for a moment you believe the propaganda. The year is 1825. Before you lies a perfect city of the mind, a vision of neoclassical order dropped into the wild, time-scented landscape of the Peloponnese. White marble colonnades gleam under the fierce sun. The library's dome, a smaller echo of the Pantheon, promises a universe of knowledge. The air is still and heavy with the scent of old paper and the hum of cicadas in the cypress trees. This place is an argument carved in stone, that Greece is not a chaotic Russian protectorate of feuding warlords, but the serene and rightful heir to Plato and Aristotle. This is the single great national project of the Peloponnesian Principality. It is the brainchild of Adamantios Korais, the intellectual giant of the Greek diaspora. From his study in Paris, Korais, our real-world anchor, waged a war of pamphlets and letters, arguing that the new Greek state would perish from its own barbarism if it did not immediately forge an elite class of enlightened leaders. He despised the Klephtic chieftains as much as he did the Turkish pashas. His vision was a republic of letters, and he convinced the wealthy Adriatic merchants and the Russian proconsuls that such an institution was the only path to long-term legitimacy. If Greece could not match Europe in cannons, it would dazzle it with intellect. And so the academy was built here, on the Isthmus of Corinth, a symbolic bridge between the Peloponnese and the mainland, between the past and the future. A staggering portion of the state's meagre budget, supplemented by massive donations from men like Lazarus Counterfactual, who craved the prestige of patronage, was poured into these marble halls. The finest architects from Italy were hired. Agents were sent across Europe to buy entire libraries from bankrupt aristocrats. You are the proof that the dream, in its own narrow way, works. You are the son of an illiterate shepherd from the mountains of Arcadia. You were discovered by a travelling priest, sponsored by a local clan leader, and you passed the grueling entrance examinations. Now you study Euclidean geometry in a hall lined with busts of ancient philosophers. Your world has been remade. The Academy is a spectacular, improbable success in two specific fields. The first is archaeology. Surrounded by the ruins of one of antiquity's richest cities, and with the whole of Greece as a potential dig site, the Academy's School of Antiquities becomes the world leader in systematic excavation. They are not treasure hunters, they are scientists. They map, they catalogue, they preserve. A young French professor, fleeing the political turmoil of the Bourbon Restoration, introduces the concept of stratigraphy. For the first time, the earth is read like a book, its layers revealing the secrets of the past. The finds are astonishing: a perfectly preserved bronze from a shipwreck, an entire Roman villa, a trove of previously unknown inscriptions. The National Archaeological Museum, housed in the Academy's East Wing, becomes a mandatory stop for any European on the Grand Tour. Greece is successfully rebranding itself as the careful curator of Europe's classical soul. The second, more surprising success is in pure mathematics. This required no expensive laboratories, no complex machinery. It needed only blackboards, chalk, and minds of genius. The Academy's first provost, a stern Phanariot who was educated in Göttingen, established a department that focused on number theory and abstract geometry. And here, they found their prodigy, a young man named Ioannis Dragoumis. The son of a provincial doctor, proves to be a once-in-a-generation talent. His treatises on prime numbers, written in elegant classical Greek, are translated and read with awe in Paris and Berlin. He corresponds with Gauss. He solves problems that have baffled mathematicians for centuries. He is the living embodiment of the Academy's promise that the Hellenic mind, freed from servitude, could once again touch the sublime. This is where the ethical tension becomes a gaping wound. You sit in a lecture on the philosophy of Plotinus, and through the open window, you can see a woman driving a laden donkey along a dusty track. The donkey is struggling. The track is barely passable. You realize that the cost of the marble column behind you could have paid to pave 10 miles of that road. The salary of the famous German philologist who is lecturing you could have funded 3 primary schools in 3 different villages for a year. The Academy is a head without a body. It is a marble ship of reason, moored in a sea of ignorance and poverty. While you learn to pass the complexities of a Pindaric ode, your family is using a wooden plough identical to one described by Hesiod 3,000 years ago. While Ioannis Dragoumis is celebrated for his work on abstract mathematical concepts, not one professor at the Academy is dedicated to practical engineering, to hydraulics, to metallurgy, to the kind of applied science that is fueling the Industrial Revolution in Britain. The very idea is seen as vulgar, beneath the institution's dignity. They are here to contemplate eternal truths, not to build better olive presses. The unexpected twist is the profound and disastrous brain drain the Academy creates. It is too good. It produces minds too brilliant for the crippled nation that surrounds it. What is a genius like Ioannis Dragoumis to do after he graduates? There are no research institutes, no advanced industries, no community of peers for him in Greece. He receives an offer a full professorship at the University of Berlin. He accepts. He is hailed as a national hero, proof of Greek genius. But he never comes back. This becomes the pattern. The best archaeologists are poached by the Louvre or the British Museum. The best classicists take up positions in Oxford. The best philosophers find patrons in St. Petersburg. The Corinthian Academy becomes the most magnificent and expensive preparatory school in the world. It polishes the nation's crown jewels, only to see them sold off to the highest foreign bidder. It does not cultivate a new Greek elite. It efficiently exports the nation's intellectual capital. As you near your own graduation, you see the bitter truth. You and your fellow students are a new class of beings, suspended between two worlds. Your education has made you unfit for the Greece that exists outside these walls. You speak an archaizing, purified form of Greek that the villagers mock. You understand the political theories of the ancient world, but not the brutal clan politics of your own. You are a stranger in your own home. The Academy, intended to give Greece a soul, has instead given it a beautiful, sterile mask. It has fostered a profound cultural contempt for the practical, the commercial, and the industrial. It teaches its students to look backward to a golden age of imagined perfection, while the rest of Europe is hurtling, powered by steam and steel, into the future. The nation is dying of thirst, and its leaders have spent all their money building a magnificent fountain that produces no water. You are standing in the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour in Nafplio, and the air is thick with incense and the low, resonant chanting of the priests. But there is a silence where a name should be. In the great litany, the priest prays for the bishops, the patriarchs, the founders of the Church. He prays for our most pious and God-protected Prince Antonios. He prays for our Christ-loving army. But he does not pray for the ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople, the spiritual father of all Orthodox Christians, the man who sits on the throne of St. Andrew. To mention his name in this church, and in every church in the Peloponnesian Principality, is now an act of treason. This is the Autocephalous Schism of 1795. It was a divorce decreed by the state, not the church. The logic, from the perspective of the Russian-backed government, was inescapable. The patriarch in Constantinople lived under the thumb of the Sultan. He was a hostage. To allow the spiritual head of the new Greek nation to be a man who could be forced, on pain of death, to condemn the Principality or excommunicate its leaders, was a strategic impossibility. The church had to be nationalized, its loyalties made unambiguous. The process was brutally simple. A synod of bishops from the Peloponnese was convened, guarded by Russian marines. Under the steely gaze of the Tsar's special envoy, they unanimously voted to declare the Church of Greece self-governing, or autocephalous. They created a new holy synod, modelled directly on the one Peter the Great had established in Russia to bring his own church to heel. The head of this synod was not a patriarch, but a government minister, a layman appointed by the prince. The church, which for 400 years under the Ottomans had been the ark of Greek identity, was now officially a department of the state. This is the ethical tension made manifest. Is a church that serves the political interests of the state truly the Church of God? You speak with an old priest in a mountain monastery, a man who refused to recognize the new synod. His monastery has been stripped of its lands. He is a pariah. For centuries, he whispers, his voice cracking with emotion, we answered to God and the patriarch. The Sultan took our property. He took our lives. but he never told us how to pray. Now, our own people, our liberators, tell us who to pray for and who to curse. They have put the Tsar's eagle on the altar. This is not freedom. This is blasphemy. His view is not shared by everyone. You listen to a sermon by the new Bishop of Corinth, a young, ambitious cleric, educated at the new academy. He preaches a muscular, nationalistic faith. The Greek church, he thunders from the pulpit, has been purified. It has been freed from a patriarchate, tainted by centuries of compromise with the infidel. The Principality is a new Byzantium, a bastion of pure orthodoxy, and its church must be a partner in this great national project. To obey the state is to obey God's will for the Hellenic people. His sermon is printed and distributed by the government. The schism sends a spiritual earthquake through the Orthodox world, a world that had, for all its ethnic diversity, looked to Constantinople as its undisputed centre. The unexpected twist is not that the other churches take sides, but how they do it. The schism is not a theological dispute. It is a geopolitical one. Now you are in St. Petersburg, in the opulent chambers of the most holy synod of the Russian Empire. The Ober-Procurator, a fearsome man who is essentially the Tsar's viceroy over the church, is dictating a letter. It is a letter of full communion and fraternal support for the new independent Church of Greece. He sees this not as a schism, but as a glorious opportunity. For centuries, Moscow has chafed under the spiritual authority of Constantinople. Russian metropolitans styled themselves as leaders of the Third Rome, the true heart of orthodoxy, but the Greek patriarch always held the primacy of honor. Now, that is changing. The Greek Church is a client. Its leaders are dependent on Russian political and military support. By championing its independence, Russia achieves a dual objective. It weakens the authority of the Patriarch in Constantinople, the only spiritual figure with the standing to challenge Moscow's ambitions. And it creates a new, loyalist bloc within the Orthodox world. Russian policy becomes one of actively encouraging and funding other autocephalous movements. They send agents and money to the Serbs, the Bulgarians, the Romanians, urging them to follow the Greek example, to break away from Constantinople and form their own national churches, which will then, naturally, look to Moscow for guidance and protection. You see the result of this policy in a dusty village in what is now Serbia. It is 1815. A local priest, funded with Russian rubles, is preaching rebellion against both the Ottoman Pasha and the Greek bishop sent from Constantinople to oversee his flock. "Why should our tithes go to a Greek in a Turkish city?" he shouts to the assembled peasants. "We are Serbs. We need a Serbian church for the Serbian people." Orthodoxy, which was once a unifying transnational faith, is being deliberately fractured and reshaped into a collection of competing nationalisms. Moscow is playing the long game, aiming to replace the old Byzantine Commonwealth with a new pan-Orthodox Commonwealth, with the Tsar at its head. The Patriarchate of Constantinople is left isolated and embattled. The Sultan naturally distrusts him more than ever, seeing him as the head of a faith whose members are constantly breaking away to form hostile, Russian-backed states. His authority bleeds away. To survive, he is forced to become more and more subservient to the Ottoman state, condemning rebellions he secretly supports, excommunicating patriots he secretly blesses. He becomes a tragic, compromised figure. Within the Peloponnesian Principality, the state church becomes a powerful tool of social control. Priests are expected to report seditious talk they hear in confession. Sermons on feast days must include praise for the government and its Russian protectors. The church, once the repository of the people's collective memory and soul, is hollowed out, its rituals intact, but its spirit replaced by the cold calculus of statecraft. You watch a young boy being taught his catechism. The priest asks, "Who is the protector of our holy Orthodox faith?" In the past, the answer would have been, "Our Lord, Jesus Christ." Now, the boy, well drilled, recites the correct answer: His Imperial Majesty, the Tsar of all the Russias. The schism, which was meant to give Greece a free church, has instead chained it to a new and far more demanding throne. It has traded a distant spiritual father for a very present political master, and in doing so has helped fracture the entire Orthodox world into a mosaic of rival ambitions. You are in Philadelphia, and the city is suffocating in the humid grip of a July afternoon in 1787. The air in the assembly room of the Pennsylvania State House is a physical weight, thick with the smell of sweat, wet wool, and the faint, sweet scent of decaying books. The windows are thrown open, but they offer no relief, only the city's soundtrack, the clatter of carriage wheels on cobblestones, the cry of a street vendor, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Here, in this stifling room, a collection of planters, lawyers, and merchants is attempting to perform an act of political alchemy, to spin a new nation out of the straw of 13 jealous, bickering states. The Articles of Confederation are failing. The nation is bankrupt. An armed rebellion of farmers in Massachusetts, led by a man named Daniel Shays, has just been suppressed, and the spectre of anarchy haunts every debate. You watch a delegate from Virginia, a small, meticulously dressed man named James Madison. He is not a great orator. His voice is weak, but when he speaks, the room falls silent, because his mind is a fortress of logic, built on a foundation of historical precedent. In our timeline, Madison's arguments for a strong federal government drew on the failures of ancient leagues, the Achaean, the Helvetic, the Amphictyonic. He read of their factionalism, their susceptibility to foreign influence, their descent into civil war, as cautionary tales from a distant classical past. But this is not our timeline. You look at the papers on Madison's desk. Beside his well-worn copies of Polybius and Plutarch lies something new. A fresh diplomatic dispatch from Thomas Jefferson, the American minister in Paris. It is a detailed, and frankly horrifying, account of the political situation in the Eastern Mediterranean. It describes the state of the Peloponnesian Principality, 17 years after its liberation. This is the Federalist's ghost. The failure of Greece is not an ancient history lesson. It is a contemporary political horror story, unfolding in real time. It is the living, breathing, screaming proof of everything Madison fears. You listen as he rises to speak, not about ancient Athens, but about the modern Maria. He does not need to name it directly. Every delegate in the room, worldly and well-read, knows exactly what he is talking about. When he speaks of the fatal poison of faction, he is not just alluding to theory. He paints a picture, drawn from Jefferson's dispatches, of the Kolokotronis and Mavromichaelis clans, Klephtic warlords who pay lip service to a central government in Nafplio while waging private wars that bleed the countryside dry. He looks at the delegates from Massachusetts and New York, states that are even now threatening a trade war over tariffs, and they understand the unspoken parallel. The Greek warlords are just Shays' rebellion, with more guns and a longer history of bloodshed. When he speaks of the insidious influence of foreign powers, it is not an abstract warning. It is a direct reference to the Russian governor in Nafplio, the Russian fleet in Port Catherine, the Russian rubles that prop up a puppet government. He describes a nation that won its freedom from one empire, only to become the client of another. He asks the delegates, if we remain a weak and divided confederacy, what is to stop the British from playing one state against another, or the French from offering a protective alliance to the southern states in exchange for control of our trade? The Principality is the cautionary tale made flesh. It is the ghost of a failed revolution, come to haunt the cradle of a new one. The ethical tension in the room is profound. These men were raised on the classics. They see themselves as the heirs of Solon and Pericles. The idea of Greek liberty is a sacred touchstone for their own revolutionary project. And now they are confronted with the hideous reality of its modern incarnation. It forces them to question their own ideals. Perhaps liberty is not enough. Perhaps virtue is not enough. Perhaps, without the iron cage of a powerful central state, a republic is doomed to devour itself. The anti-federalists, men like George Mason of Virginia, try to counter. They argue that the Greek failure proves the opposite, that the danger lies in a central government that becomes a tool of foreign powers and a new aristocracy, just as the Phanariote government in Nafplio has. Shall we establish a new Prince Komnenos in our capital? Mason thunders. Shall our president command an army to crush the states, as the Russian-trained militia crushes the Maniots? But their arguments sound hollow, theoretical. Madison has the facts. He has the contemporary example. The unexpected twist is not that the Federalist argument for a strong central government wins the day. It is how the Greek example poisons the well of American foreign policy for a century to come. In our world, the early republic was characterized by a debate between Jeffersonian internationalism and Hamiltonian realism. There was a genuine, if naive, belief that America could be a beacon of liberty, forging alliances with other republics. That dream dies here, in this room. The Greek Principality has shown them what happens when a new, weak republic gets entangled in the great game of European empires. It becomes a pawn. It becomes a protectorate. The lesson they learn is not just to be wary of entangling alliances. The lesson is to build a fortress. The debates over foreign policy take on a harder, more cynical edge. The consensus that emerges is one of stark, almost paranoid isolationism. America must be utterly self-reliant. It must have a navy powerful enough to defend its own shores. It must have a central government strong enough to speak with one voice, lest foreign powers exploit its divisions. The desire to avoid the Greek fate becomes a founding principle of the nation's grand strategy. Jefferson, upon his return from France, will not be the optimist of our timeline. He will be a man chastened, his faith in international Republican solidarity shattered by the reality of what he saw unfold in the Mediterranean. You watch Madison, late at night, his face illuminated by a single candle. He is not writing a letter or a speech. He is drafting an essay, one of a series that will be published under the pseudonym Publius. This one will be known to history as Federalist number 10. He writes of the mortal diseases under which popular governments have everywhere perished. And as he writes, the face of a Greek cleft, proud and savage, floats in his mind. He writes of the necessity of a large republic to control the violence of faction, and he sees the Peloponnese, a peninsula no bigger than Maryland, tearing itself apart. The constitution that emerges from this hot, contentious summer is the same document as in our history, but the spirit behind its ratification is different. It is forged not just in hope, but in fear. It is a pragmatic, hard-headed document designed not only to secure the blessings of liberty, but to build a wall against the chaos that they have seen consume the first European revolution of the age. The Federalists' ghost, the spectre of a failed Greek state, has shown them the abyss, and they have recoiled, building a union of iron to ensure they never fall into it. You are in Cairo, in the year 1818, and the city feels like a drum, its skin stretched tight and humming with a tension that precedes a storm. The power of the Mamluk Beys, the warrior caste that has dominated Egypt for 6 centuries, has been broken. not by the Sultan, but by the echoes of Napoleon's brief, violent passage 20 years prior. The Ottoman governor, the Pasha, is a man who holds a title but no real authority. The city, and all the fertile land of the Nile, is a prize waiting to be claimed. In the citadel that looms over the sprawling, dusty city, you watch a man who believes he is the one to claim it. He is Muhammad Ali, an Albanian officer in the Ottoman army, a man of terrifying ambition and boundless energy. He is our real-world anchor, but in this world, he is a man running out of time. He has spent the last decade consolidating his power, playing factions against each other, building a personal army of loyal Albanians. He dreams of modernizing Egypt, of building a personal dynasty, of turning this neglected province into an empire that could challenge Constantinople itself. In our history, he would succeed. Here, he is a man trying to build a fortress on a seismic fault line. The earthquake begins not in Egypt, but 1,000 miles to the northeast in Syria. You are in the Christian quarter of Damascus, in the street called Straight. For centuries, this has been a place of coexistence, uneasy but durable. But the new Ottoman state, the one forged in the paranoid fires of the post-1770 reforms, has changed the air. The Christian subjects are no longer just a tolerated minority. They are a suspect population, the kin of the Greek traitors who tore the Morea from the empire. The spark is a trivial dispute in the marketplace over the price of silk, but it falls into a city saturated with the gasoline of state-sponsored resentment. A fiery sermon by a new hardline cleric appointed from the capital incites the mob. The local Nizam, Useddid garrison, trained to see Christians as a fifth column, stands aside. The riots that follow are a brutal pogrom. Churches are burned. Homes are looted. For 3 days, the Christian and Jewish quarters of Damascus, and then Aleppo, are given over to the mob. The news of the massacres travels on the swift clipper ships of the Levant trade. It arrives in Paris and London not as a humanitarian tragedy, but as a political opportunity. You are in a quiet office in the Quai d'Orsay. The Duc de Richelieu, the French foreign minister, a man who knows Russia intimately from his years in exile, lays out the situation to his British counterpart, Lord Castlereagh. During a conference in Aix-la-Chapelle, the Sultan is either unwilling or unable to protect the Christians under his care. Richelieu begins, his voice smooth as silk. This is the official justification, the moral pretext. The real argument comes next. The Tsar will not let this stand. He will use it as a pretext to declare himself the protector of all Orthodox peoples. He will march on Constantinople. The entire edifice will collapse, and the Russian bear will be sitting astride the straits. We cannot allow this. This is the ethical tension laid bare. To prevent one empire from dominating the region, they will dominate it themselves. Their intervention is framed as a reluctant act of stabilization, a necessary police action. It is, in fact, a vivisection. Castlereagh, a man with no illusions, agrees. The Napoleonic Wars have exhausted Europe. No one wants another continent-spanning conflict over the Eastern question. A chaotic collapse of the Ottoman Empire is unacceptable. A Russian-dominated one is unthinkable. The only remaining option is a managed collapse. This is the unexpected twist. The scramble for the Levant begins not as a race, but as a pact. A cynical, secret agreement is reached. France, with its long history of cultural and religious ties to the Levant, will take responsibility for the Syrian provinces. Britain, whose entire global strategy depends on the security of the route to India, will take responsibility for Egypt. It is not a war. It is a receivership. The Ottoman Empire is declared bankrupt, and its European creditors have come to liquidate the assets. You are back in Cairo. Muhammad Ali receives the news from two separate visitors on the same day. The first is a British political agent, a cool, aristocratic man who informs him that a British expeditionary force of 10,000 men is due to land in Alexandria to restore order and secure British interests. The second is the French consul, who informs him that a French fleet is blockading the Syrian coast. He is being checkmated. The game is over before it has even begun. He looks out from the walls of the citadel. His modern, European-trained army is a fine instrument, but it was built to fight Ottomans or Mamluks, not the veterans of Waterloo. He has two choices. He can fight a glorious, suicidal war of resistance and become a martyr, or he can become a client. Muhammad Ali is a pragmatist. He chooses survival. When the British redcoats march into Cairo, he welcomes them as allies. His dream of an empire is dead. He will be allowed to rule Egypt, to grow rich, but he will do so as a glorified governor-general in a British protectorate. His title will be Khedive, but his master will be in London. The same scene plays out in Damascus. A French column marches from Beirut, unopposed. The Ottoman governor, whose inaction precipitated the crisis, is quietly shipped back to Constantinople. A French high commissioner is installed in a fine Damascene house, and the tricolour is raised over the city. For the people of the Levant, one master has been traded for another. The new masters are infinitely more efficient. The French build roads in Syria, not for the benefit of the Syrians, but to move their troops more effectively. The British dredge the canals of the Nile Delta, not to help the Egyptian fellahin, but to increase the yield of the cotton that will feed the mills of Manchester. A new order is imposed, one of geometric precision and profound alienation. European surveyors arrive with their theodolites and tripods. They begin to draw lines on maps, lines that will become the borders of the French Mandate of Syria and the British Protectorate of Egypt. These lines cut through ancient tribal lands, separate villages from their traditional grazing pastures, and create artificial entities that have no internal logic. The complex, interwoven tapestry of the Levant is being cut up into neat, manageable squares of colonial property. The process that, in our world, would follow the First World War is happening a full century earlier, before the rise of nationalism, before the Industrial Revolution has truly taken hold in the region. The modern Middle East, with all its artificial borders and intractable conflicts, is being born not in 1919, but in 1819. The seeds of future tragedies are planted in the soil of this premature, cynical partition. You are in a district courtroom in the town of Argos, and you are watching a man's life be dismantled in a language he does not understand. The year is 1830. The accused is a farmer named Yanis, from a mountain village a day's walk from here. His crime is a dispute over the ownership of an olive grove with a powerful local landowner. The judge, a pale young man who is a recent graduate of the Corinthian Academy, reads the formal charge from a thick, leather-bound book. The words that emerge from his mouth are alien. They are long, polysyllabic, and constructed with the arcane grammar of an ancient text. The judge speaks of emphiteusis, long-term leaseholds, of paragraph, statutes of limitation, and of dikaiosine, justice, in a way that sounds like a mathematical formula. He is speaking Greek, but it is not the Greek of the fields or the taverna. It is katharavousa, the purified tongue. Yanis stands mute, his face a mask of bewildered terror. He speaks the living language of the people, the tongue known as demotic. It is a language rich with Turkish words for food and household items, Italian words for sailing, and Slavic words for tools. It is the language his mother sang him lullabies in, the language he uses to curse his stubborn mule, the language he prayed in when his son was sick. It is the only language he knows. To the court, it is the babble of an uneducated peasant. It is vulgar. It is a mark of backwardness, a stain of 400 years of slavery that must be scrubbed clean. An interpreter, a local clerk who is visibly uncomfortable, translates the charge into the demotic. He says you are illegally occupying the land. Yanis explodes in a torrent of his own language. Guttural and passionate, he speaks of his grandfather who planted the trees, of the boundary stone his father showed him, of the oath the other man's family swore a generation ago. His words are a story, a history, a moral argument rooted in the soil itself. The judge listens with a look of profound distaste, as if he is being subjected to an unpleasant noise. He does not understand the nuances, the history, the passion. He hears only the corrupted words, the barbaric grammar. He cuts the interpreter off. Translate his plea. Guilty or not guilty? The details are irrelevant. The documents are clear. This is the purist's tongue in action. It is the single most ambitious and self-destructive policy of the new Greek state. Its architect is the great intellectual Adamantios Korais, who from his desk in Paris diagnosed the sickness of the Greek soul. He argued that the demotic language was the sound of servitude. To be a modern European nation, Greece had to sound like one. It had to resurrect the pure language of its classical ancestors, cleansed of all foreign pollution. It was a project of immense intellectual arrogance and tragic naivete. It was an attempt to perform surgery on the nation's soul with a grammarian's knife. The policy, adopted with religious fervour by the Phanariote elite and the graduates of the Corinthian Academy, has become an instrument of class warfare. To get a job in the government, to become an army officer, to be a teacher, you must master Catharavousa. It is a linguistic wall built around the entire apparatus of the state. It ensures that power remains in the hands of the tiny, educated elite who can speak this artificial language, a class of men who have more in common with each other than with the people they rule. The ethical tension is that this was not done with malicious intent. Korais and his followers genuinely believed they were elevating their people, giving them a language worthy of their heritage. They saw themselves as doctors curing a disease. But the medicine is a poison. It has created a state of internal bilingualism, a cultural schizophrenia. There is an official Greece that writes its laws and pronounces its judgments in the cold, brittle language of the past. And there is a real Greece that lives, loves, fights, and dies in the warm, messy, living language of the present. You see the consequences everywhere. A government decree about new farming techniques is posted in a village square. It is written in Catharavousa. No one can read it. A young officer, trained at the new military academy, tries to give orders to his soldiers, who are peasant conscripts. He uses the formal, classical vocabulary he was taught. They stare at him blankly. To be effective, he must resort to the vulgar demotic, an act for which he can be officially reprimanded. The state is trying to communicate with its own body in a language that body does not recognize. The unexpected twist is the birth of a powerful, defiant counterculture. The demotic language, by being officially denigrated, becomes the symbol of everything authentic and truly Greek. It becomes the language of resistance. In the tavernas of the Plaka in Nafplio, and in the mountain hideouts of the Clefts, a new art form is flourishing, the political ballad. You sit in a smoky room, the air thick with the smell of wine and grilled meat. A man with a scarred face and a voice like gravel is singing, accompanying himself on a stringed bouzouki. The song is not about ancient heroes. It is about the trial you witness today. It tells the story of Yanis the farmer, of his honest sweat and the crooked words of the ink drinkers in their powdered wigs. The song is in raw, powerful demotic. It uses Turkish words without shame. It rhymes justice with thievery. The chorus, sung by every man in the room, is a roar of defiance. They can steal our olives, but they can't steal our tongue. This is a literature of the people, for the people. It is a living, breathing culture that is growing in the shadows of the official, sterile classicism of the state. The legends of the revolution, the stories of Kolokotronis and the other warlords, are all being codified in demotic poems and songs. The very heroes the state claims to venerate are being immortalized in a language the state has declared unfit for heroes. The chasm widens every year. The children of the elite are sent to the academy to learn the pure tongue, while the children of the poor learn the ballads of resistance at their father's knee. Two separate Greeces are being raised, speaking two different languages, honouring two different sets of heroes, and dreaming two different futures. The language question is no longer a matter of linguistics. It is the central, defining political battleground of the nation. It is a war for the very definition of what it means to be Greek. In the courtroom in Argos, the judge delivers his verdict in crisp, perfect katharevousa. The landowner's documents, written in the same language, are deemed valid. Janiss's verbal testimony, based on memory and honour, is dismissed. He has lost his land. As he is led from the courtroom, a broken man, he mutters a curse under his breath. It is a short, sharp, ancient curse in the purest demotic. The judge does not understand the words, but he understands the hatred in the man's eyes. It is a hatred he and his class are cultivating, field by field, verdict by verdict, all across this divided and unhappy land. You are standing in a field of wet tobacco near the town of Monastir, and the year is 1848. The air is still, but it is the stillness of a held breath. The leaves of the tobacco plants are riddled with small, neat holes, but they were not made by insects. They were made by bullets. You are looking at the front line of a war that does not officially exist. This is Macedonia, the great, sprawling, multi-ethnic heartland of the Ottoman Balkans, and it is being torn apart. This is the Balkan Tinderbox, ignited a half-century before its time. In our history, the Macedonian question was a savage, complex conflict of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a struggle between emerging nations over the inheritance of a dying empire. Here, the process has been brutally accelerated. The early independence of Greece and the subsequent aggressive expansion of a resurgent, Russian-backed Serbia have turned this land into a crucible of competing nationalisms, each one absolute, each one armed, and each one irreconcilable. You are with a small band of men who call themselves the Makedonomachoi, the Macedonian fighters. Their leader is a captain from the Peloponnesian Principality, a man named Pavlos Melas. He is not a soldier of the Greek army. He is an advisor, a volunteer. His mission funded not by the Greek state, but by a shadowy patriotic society in Nafplio called the Hellenic Dawn. He and his men are here to ensure that when the Ottoman Empire finally crumbles, this land will fall to Greece. Their method is not open battle. That would risk a full-scale war. Their method is a slow, grinding campaign of terror and persuasion. You watch them enter a village. The village is what the Ottomans call a mosaic. Half the families speak a dialect of Greek. The other half speak a Slavic dialect that is not yet fully Serbian or Bulgarian. They are all Orthodox Christians. Their ancestors have lived here, side by side, for 500 years. They see themselves as Christians, as villagers of this specific place. They do not think of themselves as Greeks or Serbs. Melas is here to teach them. he gathers the village elders. His speech, delivered in the pure Katharavousa that a local priest must translate, is a history lesson and a threat. He speaks of Alexander the Great, of Philip of Macedon, of the undying Hellenic soul of this land. He explains that any village that declares itself for the Greek cause will be protected. Its young men will be given rifles. Its priests will be given stipends. He opens a sack of silver coins to make his point. Then comes the threat. He points to the charred ruins of a church on a nearby hill. That village, he explains, made the wrong choice. They listened to the Serbian agitators. We had to cleanse them, Melas says, his voice devoid of emotion. This is a Greek land. Those who are not with us are against us. This is the ethical tension, distilled to its most brutal form. Melas is not a monster. In his own mind, he is a patriot, a crusader, fighting a just war to liberate his enslaved countrymen. He believes he is bringing them the gift of national identity. But the gift is delivered at the point of a gun. To create his pure Hellenic Macedonia, he must first destroy the real, messy, multicultural Macedonia that has existed for centuries. He is a doctor performing an amputation with a butcher's axe. 2 days later, you are in the same region, but you are with a different group of armed men. These are the Komitaji, Serbian partisans, led by a fearsome man with a black beard, a former officer in the Serbian army. Their methods are identical to Melas's. They too have a history lesson. They speak not of Alexander, but of the medieval Serbian emperor Stefan Dušan, who ruled from Skopje. They too offer guns and money. They too point to burned villages as a warning. The unexpected twist is the role of the Ottoman authorities. They are not the primary enemy. In fact, they are almost irrelevant. The local pasha, with his small demoralized garrison, is a lion tamer in a cage with 3 starving tigers. He cannot control the Greek and Serbian bands that roam the countryside, so he plays them against each other. When Melas's band becomes too strong, he quietly provides the Serbian Komitaji with information on their whereabouts. When the Serbs sack a village too close to a major town, he allows the Greeks to ambush their supply line. The Ottoman Empire, in its dotage, is prolonging its own life by expertly fanning the flames of the internecine Christian hatreds. And a third player has just entered the game. You meet a man in a coffee house in Salonika. He is a schoolteacher, recently returned from Odessa. He does not speak of Alexander or Stefan Dušan. He speaks of saints, Cyril, and Methodius. He speaks of the Bulgarian Tsars. He hands you a pamphlet, printed in Russia. It is a grammar for a new literary language, a standardized Bulgarian. He and his comrades are creating a nation on paper, giving a name and a history to the Slavic speakers who feel neither Greek nor Serb. He is a man of books, not guns, but he tells you, his eyes burning with a quiet fire, that the guns will come. We are the true people of this land, he says. We are the majority, and we will not be a footnote in a Greek epic or a Serbian ballad. The great powers are being dragged into the morass. Russia, the original patron of Balkan nationalism, is now a victim of its own success. Its 2 main clients, Greece and Serbia, are at each other's throats. The Tsar's diplomats in Nafplio and Belgrade try to mediate, to urge caution, but nationalism is a fire that, once lit, cannot be easily controlled. Austria-Hungary, watching with undisguised horror from its own Balkan frontier, sees the chaos as proof that these Slavic peoples are unfit to rule themselves. They begin drawing up their own contingency plans for an occupation of Bosnia and a push south towards Salonika, to impose an imperial peace before the Russian-backed chaos consumes the entire region. You are back in the tobacco field near Monastir. A firefight has broken out between Melas's band and a Serbian patrol. It is a small, vicious affair. fought from behind stone walls and ancient trees. You see a young Greek fighter, a boy of no more than 18, his face streaked with dirt and fear. He is from a village that declared itself Greek 2 months ago. You see a young Serbian fighter, his mirror image, hiding behind a tree 50 yards away. He is from a village that declared itself Serb. 6 months ago, their families might have celebrated a Saint's Day together. Today, they are trying to kill each other for a cause they have only just been taught to understand. This is the future of the Balkans, born in blood and confusion. The Macedonian question has become the focal point for all the hatreds, ambitions, and fears of southeastern Europe. It is a proxy war between aspiring nations and their imperial patrons. It is a powder keg with 3 separate sputtering fuses, and it is only a matter of time before one of them reaches the black powder and the whole of Europe feels the explosion. You are in the Palazzo Mocenigo, on the Grand Canal in Venice, and the air is heavy with the scent of decay. Not the romantic decay of a fallen republic, but the stale, cloying smell of old wine, guttering candles, and unwashed laundry. The year is 1823. Sprawled on a divan of faded silk is the man who is supposed to be the blazing sun of the Romantic Age, Lord Byron. He is 35 years old and looks 50. He is bored. He is not a hero, a pilgrim, or a revolutionary. He is a tourist in the ruins of Europe, and he is running out of ruins. He holds a letter from his friend, Percy Shelley, who writes with frantic passion from Pisa about his new drama, Charles I. It is a dark psychological play about the crumbling of a king's mind. There is no talk of liberty, no call to arms. The great poetic project of the age is not to change the world, but to dissect its madness. This is the world without a Greek cause. This is the lost Byronic Age. In our history, by this year, Byron would be consumed by the Philhellenic fever. He would be in Cephalonia, drilling soldiers, spending his fortune, preparing to sail for the mainland to join the Greek War of Independence. That war, the one that began in 1821, was a clarion call to every liberal, every classicist, every romantic in Europe. It was a pure, noble struggle, the descendants of Pericles throwing off the yoke of the infidel Turk. It was a cause you could write poems about, a cause you could die for. In this world, that cause never existed. There was no need for it. The Peloponnesian Principality has been a messy geopolitical fact for 53 years. It is not a romantic dream. It is a diplomatic headache. You see it through Byron's eyes, through the reports he reads in the English newspapers. Greece is a backward, semi-failed Russian client state, famous for its warring clans, its bankrupt government, and its production of an austere, authoritarian brand of neoclassicism that Byron, a lover of passion and excess, finds utterly repellent. The Spartan Mirage has made the idea of Greece deeply unfashionable. It is a symbol not of liberty, but of order imposed by a foreign power. To champion the cause of modern Greece would be like championing the cause of a dreary Russian naval base. There is no glory in it. So Byron stays in Italy. His immense energy, his passion, his bottomless capacity for heroic action, turning inward and curdling. He writes, his Don Juan is longer, more bitter, more sexually explicit, and even more misanthropic than the masterpiece we know. It is a work of breathtaking genius, but it is a genius devoid of hope. Its only hero is cynicism itself. He dabbles in the plots of the Carbonari, the Italian secret societies, but finds them to be amateurs and fools. He has affairs, he drinks, he grows fat. He is a caged lion, and the cage is a world without a worthy cause. The ethical tension is the terrible trade-off between a political reality and a cultural idea. The Greeks of the Peloponnese are, in a limited and compromised sense, free. But the idea of Greece, the dream of a nation struggling to be born, is lost to the world. And that idea, it turns out, was more powerful than the nation itself. It was a catalyst. It was a mirror in which the Romantic generation saw its own best self reflected. Heroic, idealistic, willing to sacrifice all for freedom. Without that mirror, the reflection is warped. The unexpected twist is the profound darkening of the European cultural imagination. The heroic, optimistic strain of Romanticism withers and dies. The movement does not disappear, but its center of gravity shifts from the political to the psychological, from the heroic to the grotesque. You are in Paris, at the Salon of 1824. The defining painting is not Delacroix's vibrant, heart-rending massacre at Chios. That event never happened in this context. The painting everyone is talking about is Géricault's The Raft of the Medusa. It is a masterpiece of despair, a pyramid of suffering, a testament to the failure of hope and the triumph of cannibalism. This, the critics agree, is the true image of the age. Not men fighting for freedom, but men eating each other to survive. The great muses of the generation are not liberty and national self-determination. They are madness, suicide, disease, and the monstrous. The most influential English book of the era is not Byron's heroic poetry, but Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, with its tortured, outcast creature and its overreaching, damned creator. In Germany, the dark tales of E.T.A. Hoffmann, with their themes of automata and split personalities, are not niche curiosities. They are the mainstream. The art of the age is an art of autopsy. It wants to cut open the body of a sick society and gaze upon its diseased organs. This is the world Byron inhabits. He is its king, but it is a kingdom of ashes. He can find no external evil great enough to match the tempests inside him. The Turk is just another player in the great game. The holy alliance of conservative monarchs is a boar, not a dragon to be slain. One evening, in the summer of 1824, he takes his yacht, the Bolivar, out into the Gulf of La Spezia. A storm is brewing. The sky, a menacing bruise of purple and black. His companions urge him to turn back. He laughs, a sound more of defiance than of joy. He has always been fascinated by the sublime power of nature, its beautiful, senseless violence. He has challenged every convention of man. Now he will challenge the sky itself. He sails directly into the heart of the storm. His body washes ashore 3 days later. The world mourns the passing of a great poet, a scandalous celebrity. But no one mourns him as a hero. There are no grand eulogies about his sacrifice for a noble cause. He did not die of a fever in Missolonghi, a martyr for Greek liberty. He died in a pointless, self-inflicted act of romantic nihilism. A man who, finding no worthy battle to fight in the world, picked a fight with a thunderstorm and lost. He is not the Byronic hero we know, the noble outcast fighting for freedom. He is the ultimate hero of his own darker, more cynical age. A magnificent, glorious failure. In one history, a nation is born in fire and compromise, 50 years ahead of its time. In another, an idea island. The divergence at Kalamata in 1770 presents us not with a better world, but a different one. A world of stark and brutal trade-offs. The early Greek state, this Peloponnesian principality, is a geopolitical reality. Its existence forces an earlier, more violent modernization on its Ottoman rival, and prompts a more fearful, centralized design in the American founders. The great powers are forced to confront the Eastern question half a century sooner, leading to a premature, cynical carve-up of the Levant that plants the seeds of colonial conflict 100 years in advance. Russia achieves its strategic dream of a Mediterranean fleet. only to find itself locked in a premature great game with Britain for the soul of Asia. It is a world where history's clock has been pushed forward, resulting in a series of states, Greek, Ottoman, American, that are harder, more pragmatic, and more authoritarian. They are arguably stronger, but their strength is born of fear, not of hope. What is lost is the dream. Our world had the Philhellenic movement, the poetry of Shelley, the martyrdom of Byron. It had the ideal of a classical people rising up, an ideal that electrified a generation and gave the abstract concept of national liberty a face and a voice. The Greek War of Independence was a bloody, messy affair, but its narrative, the story it told the world, was one of sublime heroism. That narrative shaped the 19th century, inspiring other nationalist movements and fueling the fires of liberal revolution. The alternate timeline has the reality of an early Greek state, but it is a reality so compromised, so dominated by foreign interest and internal strife, that it inspires no one. It is a cautionary tale, and in losing that inspiration, the world loses more than just poems and paintings. It loses a certain kind of political optimism. The history born from the successful Orlov uprising is a more cynical one, a world where the great struggles are for power, not for ideals. One history gained a flawed state. The other history gained a flawless myth. The tragedy lies in the fact that, to build a better world, a people often needs both.